Good evening. I would like to call to order this meeting of the Winchton Board of Selectmen. It is Monday, February 13th, 2023 at 6:32 p.m. If you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who is audio or video recording? If you would please raise your hand or otherwise signify. And I see none. Thank you. All right, Selectmen's comments and announcements. Mr. Ward?
I'd like to note the passing of Raymond C. Clapp on February 1st, a 1958 graduate of Murdoch High School. Ray served on both the school committee and the Board of Selectmen. I just want his family to know that his service to the town is remembered and appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Anderson?
None at this time.
Thank you. Mrs. Salter?
None at this time?
Thank you. Mrs. Lapointe?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone that we have another month to go for turning in papers for the seats that are open for the election this coming May. There are multiple seats open. There is one 3-year appointment to the Board of Selectmen. There are 2 3-year appointments to the school committee. There are 2 3-year, not appointments, election to be elected to the Board of Health. 1 5-year term, that's the word I was looking for the Housing Authority. Housing Authority, right? Yeah. Papers can be picked up at the town clerk's office here in town, the town hall. Signatures need to be returned actually 1 month from today on March 13th, 2023. And on the note of the elections and, public office, especially at the local level, and I'm speaking for myself when I say this, I feel that it's a regrettable fact that sometimes without all the information or with only one half of the story, people in town will make up their minds about something or someone or a member of the board or a committee. They feel that their elected officials are not keeping their best interests at heart. They feel that we're serving our own interests and we're self-centered and we have our own agendas. And I know those people are going to be out there. You can't not have them. But I hope that those of you who recognize the hard work that everyone puts in and how truly committed we or I am on the Board of Selectmen, that you would consider stepping up to one of these positions. Pull papers, approach one of us if you have questions about how things work. Please know that there's always 2 sides to the story. And speaking for myself, I'm always open to listening to what people have to say. You may not always like my answer, but we're open and we're here for you. So I'd hope that some people will consider taking out nomination papers, and we'll get some of these seats filled. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Next up, public comments and announcements. Anyone have a public comment or announcement? And I see and hear none. Thank you. We have no public hearings this evening. Appointments. We have a new person joining the team this evening. Mr. Saltzback, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take a moment to publicly recognize a new addition to Winchton Town Hall. We've had a vacancy in the accountant position since late October, and thank you to Joanne Gogan, who immediately came out of retirement to help us keep things moving along. But we have a new addition today, Katie Medina, who's sitting 3 people to my right, who was actually here at Town Hall in the assistant treasurer collector capacity several years ago. More recently was the assistant town accountant for the town of Lunenburg, and will be joining us as of today as the town accountant for the town of Winchendon. So, Katie, if you'd like to say anything, now's a good time.
Just grateful for this opportunity and looking forward to working for the town of Winchendon.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Appointments are always so much more pleasant than resignations, although you recognize why they have to happen. Next up, we do have one permit license application from the Winchendon CAC for the Winchenstock Concert and Fundraiser to be held on 8/12. And good evening. Good evening. The faces we know, but for the record, please state your names.
Madam Chair?
Miranda Jennings.
Yes,
Can
Mrs.
I interrupt?
Lapointe.
I actually don't think it's necessary, but for just safety, I'm going to recuse myself for this conversation.
Thank you.
Miranda Jennings. And
Shayna Cunningham.
Welcome. So Winchenstock, tell us what you got planned.
so the Big Random, with the LaPointes, is hosting the Winchenstock. Sorry. They are putting on the Winchenstock Epic concert again in Winchendon, this time at the Community Park Amphitheater, as a benefit for the CAC. So we are helping organize all the logistics and things like that. So it's on the 12th from 12 to 9. They have a lineup of different bands. We're going to have food trucks provided, and hopefully local vendors. We still have to scope out the area and see if that's possible. But we would like, the theme is love and local, so we'll be spotlighting local businesses and entrepreneurs and bands.
Very good. So this is August 12th. Questions, comments from the board members?
You arranged to have a police detail?
Yes, we will be taking care of that.
And I see the rental fee is paid. No issues from department heads, other than just confirming.
I have terrible
Is this
handwriting.
considered a nonprofit? Or? Okay, so it was discounted anyway, okay. Sorry, say something?
I was actually going to ask questions to that effect.
Okay,
I'm assuming since it's a fundraiser that you're going to be charging admission?
Yeah.
And I'm just curious how you're going to do that, knowing, the layout of the park, and that it can be accessed from a number of different sides and areas. So I
That's a
guess
good
this
question.
being the first one that's going to be held, and I was very curious how that was going to happen.
Very good question. I assume with the entrance to the park, I don't know, we'll have bracelets, so people that pay have tickets, because there'll be online ticket sales.
So if somebody comes up through the woods without a bracelet,
Yeah, I
you
don't,
would notice?
that's a good question. We would need to consider that. I don't have, that's a really good question.
Okay.
Does anybody have?
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that like all the parking and stuff will have to be in the main entrance, but yeah, someone could just walk in through the trails. So probably a bracelet. But that's a really good question.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara.
Something to work on. Well,
We're gonna work on that.
That's how I
I'll have an
roll.
answer before the concert.
And the other question was just to clarify that because the CAC, and of course you're going to be doing a presentation in a little bit, but the CAC is not a town entity and you're not a town department, but you're still a nonprofit organization. And so the proceeds from the fundraiser will be going where?
They'll be going to the CAC for our programming, which includes emergency funding for residents, financial coaching, all the stuff we're going to go over tonight, but all the programs that benefit the community and the
Okay.
costs associated with that.
Thank you.
Hey, anything further from the board? If there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
move to approve the entertainment license from Winchendon CAC as presented this evening.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Yes. Are we continuing?
I would entertain a motion to take 7.1 out of order.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. We are now on 7.1. The Winchendon Community Action Action Committee has a presentation. I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Thank you for letting us present. This is important for us to present to our town what we're doing, and especially because you guys fund a big portion of what we do, which we really appreciate. So we wanted to report out on what we've been doing. Shane and I both stepped into the role of director and program manager at the CAC in May, I think it was, or April. And we have taken the reins on work that many people have been doing before us. So I want to recognize the previous directors and all the volunteers that have been doing this work long before we were here. But just wanted to give you a snapshot of kind of what we do, who we're serving, why we're doing it, and how it all happens. So right now, we have a database that we get for free, actually, through MIT, and we're able to do a better job of tracking who we're serving. So right now, we have about, actually, 450 households registered, which comes out to over 1,000 of our residents. Most of our residents are on SNAP, which are food stamps, and many of them, almost 40% or over 40%, are on Social Security or disability. And you can see through the charts just kind of, the adults versus the children versus the seniors, the ethnic and racial background, which are important for us to track. So we're ensuring that we're serving proportionally the demographics of our community, which right now we're doing a pretty good job, although the younger populations are far more diverse than this. So we need to continue tracking the demographics, not just of race and ethnicity, but to make sure we're really serving everybody and not missing a group that could be in need. Why is this work important? I think all of us know why this is needed in our town. These are just some statistics about Winchendon. The little map in the corner is the Massachusetts Food is Medicine map, and it highlights the regions or the towns that have the highest chronic disease burden, which is often caused by chronic nutrition problems, poverty, and a lot of different issues. And you can see Winchendon is the darkest red color, which is the highest level. So we are a food pantry, so we are directly addressing a lot of the nutrition issues, but we are also, addressing poverty. We have a substantial amount of children, especially young children living in poverty in our community, a great number of students that are high needs, and a lot of financial issues that are facing residents. So these are just some statistics about our community and why we're doing this work.
Could you go back for just a second, please? The terms unbanked or underbanked. I understand what a bank is. Just in relation to this percentage, what are you referring to?
Folks that don't have accounts at local banks or believe in it.
Okay, thank you.
We put this graphic together to kind of show what we're trying to do. Traditionally, I think the CAC is seen as functioning mainly in the far left in the crisis mode. We do have the food pantry and the Haven of Hope, which we'll go over in a little bit more detail. But through our work in the past 8 months and previous work as well, our goal isn't just to give people a fish. We want to work to teach people to fish and then also understand why maybe there are no fish in our pond. Look at what's really happening upstream. So look at move residents from crisis all the way to stability. And we do that through a bunch of different programs, which we're going to go through kind of in order of that continuum of well-being. So Sheena's going to talk us through some of these.
So these are the services that the CAC has always offered. The food pantry. Last year, we served 124,183 pounds of food that was shared between our members, which is a $238 value. We have, $1,000. All right, for the emergency assistance, we use over $30,000 a year in funds for emergency shelter, heating, electricity, rent, mortgage, school supplies. You see on the left that we'll partner with Mock to bring fuel assistance, outreach to the Winchendon CAC with the GFA to do the back-to-school backpack program. And then the Haven of Hope. So this is for the homeless population that we serve in Winchendon. There's shower and laundry facilities, access to an address, a lot of the services that folks need. You need a physical address in order to receive them, like SNAP, Mass Health, and many others. They can use the internet, access the phone. We do a lot of case management and wraparound services. And the shower, the laundry room, this whole area of the Haven of Hope benefited over 20 clients in 2022. All right, and this is some of the programming that Miranda and I have brought on in the past 9 months since coming on at the CAC. So affordable, healthy eating from our pantry to yours in partnership with Fidelity Bank through HEAL. We'll do a Tasty Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, which is where supplies from our pantry are used to create a meal so that folks can then access those meals and then make them at home if that's something that they're interested in. So then on Tuesday through Friday, we have the Love and Local Farm Stand where SNAP and HIP are accepted. Yeah, moving forward. So with the Love and Local Farm Stand, that's really crucial because it gives all members of our community, regardless of their socioeconomic status, an opportunity to contribute to the local economy. So it's open to the public. We accept SNAP and HIP, which is the Healthy Incentives Program, which most folks are unaware of. It's a benefit amount that is in addition to your SNAP benefits that you can access to buy local produce. It supports local farmers. So it provides 71 cents per dollar compared to, and there's a typo in there, the 15 cents per dollar that they would get if they were selling through a big box store. So it benefits our local farmers, it benefits our community and our economy. The proceed benefit goes to the CAC programs, and it helps everyone's health and the local economy. So this is the Economic Empowerment Hub and the Fresh Start program. So we begin meeting with our members and clients and setting short-term and long-term goals with them for financial stability and overall well-being. So we're transitioning out of that emergency services and really moving towards sustainability. We want to help people help themselves through financial coaching, life coaching. We have access to numerous trainings, a matching funds program, a revolving fund that we've begun, and other wraparound service support to make sure, even if it's something that we don't offer, that it's that warm handoff through creating a community resource guide and developing those connections with other organizations in our community or that serve our community. SNAP and HIP enrollment, we're working to close the SNAP gap, which is really essential. I want to say, how much is our economy missing out on? Millions of dollars. Like, we have a huge SNAP gap in Winchendon, so we've really been signing a lot of folks up. All those other wraparound services, whether it be mental, behavioral health, housing, whatever needs, we really try to meet, or at the very least provide that warm handoff. And then creating community advisory boards, because we want to hear from our community members. What do they want to see? What do they feel our community is missing? Like, what gaps are there? And what would they like to see happen? We're doing that with youth and adults.
And the youth. So doing youth empowerment work is not something that the CAC does alone. We partner with Mount Wachusett Community College and HEAL and the Youth Change Makers. We have just kind of become the home for the Sunshine Cafe, which is opening on Wednesday. We hope you all can be there. But we also partner with Toy Town and Murdoch Middle School to do after-school programs in partnership again with Mount Wachusett United Way Youth Venture Programming to build skills and, in civic engagement and communication, interpersonal skills, and other life skills. We partner with the ALL program at the high school and the middle school, and their students come by almost on a daily basis. They're going to be preparing food there and learning how to run the cafe as well, because a need that we've heard from the teachers and administrators there is that there aren't a lot of life skills development programs for students in the ALL program. So we're trying to provide a space for that. And as I mentioned before, the Sunshine Cafe, we're shamelessly promoting the opening on Wednesday. But this is great to see the youth, you know, they've been working on this for 4 years, started as a little push cart, and it's amazing to see how they've stuck with it and really grown the initiative. And we have 8 youth change makers that are working, getting paid as youth leaders in town to spearhead this work. And then we also get some summer stipend money through different grants to employ additional students to do this work. And finally, kind of most upstream, we recognize that no matter how hard people might work, some of the systems in place are just going to provide barriers for people. So we need to, as an organization, look at ourselves and say, what can we do better to reduce barriers? So we're working to evaluate our policies and practices to see how we can be more inclusive and equitable. We're working with the town to do that as well. And we recently received a grant in partnership with the town called the CHI grant, the Community Health Inclusion Index, where we have a group of residents with disabilities and youth with disabilities leading the charge to roll out an assessment with all the organizations in town to evaluate how accessible they are to residents with disabilities and different abilities, and then recommending changes that they can make to policies and environment. So that's something we'll be working on through June. And finally, kind of the upstairs at the CAC, for any of you who've been there, has kind of turned into this learning lab where we have kids running the cafe, we have the empowerment hub, we have trainings, we're trying to develop a commercial kitchen up there. We're running out of space, so we're looking into different space options, but we have kind of all of these things in the wheel happening. We have a makerspace grant that we got that we're going to roll out at the CAC as well. So again, trying to provide that spectrum of care from emergency to employment and self-sustainability and thriving for everybody. Oh yeah, and we have lots of community events. Those are from our holiday party, which is really fun. So we do Christmas gifts, holiday party. We have a birthday club. We do Thanksgiving meals, Easter meals if we can, winter holiday baskets, those types of things. And most importantly, none of this happens without our community, and I think this is what's so great about Winchendon is, you know, when you ask anybody about why they love Winchendon, it's because of the people and that we all come together in times of need. And the CAC runs 80% on volunteer work. We have no full-time staff at the CAC. We have an incredible board, who some people are here tonight, and we have volunteers, many of you who are here, that make it happen. Every day we have, you know, at least 5 people volunteering 6 to 8 hours a day to make this happen. So I just can't thank all of our volunteers enough and everybody who's been there to make this happen. It's great. I think it's a great model for our town because it provides that constant volunteer opportunity for people to give back, and you really do make a difference. So thank you to all of our volunteers. Oh, and there's more. We wanted to, sorry, I have 5 minutes, I think. Just to give you an idea of how we're spending our money. This kind of breaks down. You can see food access is our largest piece. We get the equivalent of about $200,000 from the Worcester County Food Bank and in-kind donations for the food. So that's a huge chunk of our operations. But we have expanded, as you can see on the right, the community education and empowerment work, the emergency assistance, and then about 20% goes to our utilities and overhead for salaries. And our funding sources come primarily, again, from the big orange chunk is the in-kind donations from the food and the volunteer labor, which is over, I think it's valued at over like $80,000 of what people are giving back to our town, so that's incredible. We are applying for lots and lots of grants right now, so we're getting more and more of those to fund these additional programs. The town of Winchendon provides a chunk of the funding, which is extremely helpful because so many of these grants are typically for the equipment or for the food or for the heating and stuff like that, but without heat in our building, internet, and staff, none of that can happen. So your contribution really keeps the wheels turning so that everything else in that wheel can turn. And then we do some fundraisers. Since we've been there, we've noticed a very stark increase in need, just from 200 families to now over 450 families. So every day we've had new families coming in that have never come to the CAC before or who are new to town. So we've seen a really sharp increase in need just in this past year. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that the past 4 years, the need has really increased. Last year, there was a dip, it looks like, but we're reaching back up to COVID numbers. So in 2020, that was, end of 2019, and then 2020 was when COVID hit. So there was a very sharp increase in need. We did have more funding for resources, and the CAC was actually, closed during COVID. People weren't going into the building, so there was a lot of deliveries happening, and a lot of funding for additional food and resources, which was great. And now in 2022, if you can go back to the other slide, sorry. In 2022, we are reaching those numbers again. However, the CAC building is open, so those people are coming into the building. We have a lot of different programs that are happening that are being supported by essentially the same amount of staff. So we're doing a lot more with an increasing need, which is great, but it's a lot happening. So we really appreciate your support and all the support we've been getting. And the last one is just messages from our children in town saying why they love the CAC. So from, on the left, it's a warm family. One kid liked the pizza, and, nice people. It's a family. Yeah, so, hey, Deb. Deb is the one who does all the Tasty Tuesdays. She's an amazing volunteer. So that's the CAC in a nutshell. Thank you for listening.
Oh,
Thanks for
thank you very
support, and
much.
I'd be happy to answer any questions or concerns that you have.
We're up to the board. Questions, comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
one of the figures you put up there really is sad. 40.1% of children under the age of 5 are living below the poverty level. Is that in Winchendon?
Yes, that is from the Haywood's health assessment report that they do every year, and it's broken down by town. Yeah.
Yeah, that one is depressing. My only real question is, I noticed that what you're doing has increased dramatically 2019, 2022. How is your budget keeping up to that demand? Or is it?
Hi. It is, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of grant writing. We are, doing fundraisers like Winch and Stock is very, very helpful, but it is, as the utility costs especially increase, our electric bill just doubled, and we didn't budget for that in this fiscal year. So those are things that, again, we would need to find additional funding for. So our budget is not met yet this year. And if we can't fund if we don't raise the funds for it, then we can't do it. Yeah.
The only last thing I'd like to say is, everybody watching, please go to the Sunshine Cafe on Wednesday, 2:30 for the grand opening, 2:30 to 6,
Yes.
and support the young people. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Anything further from the board? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you only serve Winchendon residents?
That's a good question. We are able to serve Royalston residents and Templeton, Hubbardston, kind of people that are in the area that don't have a CAC or something similar to go to. So Gardner has its own CAC. Athol and Orange have some different food pantries. So there is some flexibility, but generally it's just Winchendon and then some Royalston and Templeton residents. What do you say?
Yeah, that's about accurate, unless it's a service that we offer that no other local CACs offer, which is a common theme lately. We're having many folks come in from other communities, like, oh, we access food from the CAC in Gardner or wherever it may be, but they want to access some of the other programs or trainings or additional offerings that we're bringing to the Winchendon CAC, and we always welcome folks in that case.
But the emergency funding and those funds are just designated for Winchendon residents.
Thank you very much. Anything further? Oh, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Going back to our agenda, we have 6.1, presentation of the FY24 Capital Improvement Plan. Mr. Kane, I'll give you an opportunity to call your board to order. Do you have a quorum? Yes, okay. Yep. Mr. Kane, you want to call your committee to order? Okay. Okay, so you're back in. Okay, you're welcome. All right, I'll turn this over to Mr. Saltzback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to highlight that we're joined this evening by the Chair of the Capital Planning Committee, Mr. Mike Barbaro. I guess just to provide a quick prompt, so a thank you to the Capital Planning Committee. They've done a real thorough job of reviewing the plan that our team has put together. Ultimately, we're looking at 14 projects totaling in at about $2.5 million with the recommended funding sources below. From there, I think I'll hand it off to you, Mr. Barbaro, if you'd like to walk through the specific
Sure.
items on the plan.
Good evening, and thank you for letting me have the opportunity to talk to you. So, a couple of things we've changed as we've been talking to you over the last 2 years. One of them was now to start funding a way to look at projects by funding the money for consultants to come in and give us a bid setup. The second thing we did this year, we introduced was a rating scale based on needs and assessment, and you can see it right there. How we rate what the capital plan has been given to us from different departments, we rated them on a scale. As you can see, the highest ratings will get funded most of the time. This year, we're a little lucky because we have some additional funding sources and a different way to approach things. So I'll start from the top. We're looking at the pre-design of Blair Square. The reason for that is a $130,000 cost. Again, to bring a project to fruition, you now have to have a phased design. One of the things about that is we are now trying to get on the state TIF. As like with Central Street, this would be funded by the state, which would take this, this project off the taxpayers of Winchendon. So by having this in place and ahead, it would be called what's called a shovel-ready project. So when the money comes available through the TIF, we have the project ready to go, and all the bid specs will be there to go and move forward. Any questions on that? And Blair Square's a long time coming. Secondly, we have Town Hall repairs Phase 1 for $250,000. That is a 5-year borrowing, and that will come out of the annual budget. Next up is the 6-wheel dump truck. What we've been doing over the last 6 or 7 years now is to rotate our equipment. Most of the equipment prior to about 6 years ago was into the 1990s and well-used. So what we've been doing is, as we borrow a piece of equipment, we lease it for 5 years. Once it is paid off, then we look at another piece of equipment to upgrade. So we're now moving into the 2000s and further beyond. The life expectancy of our equipment, with good care now from the maintenance department, expected lifetime use is 20 years. So as we bring the equipment up to grade, you've seen a lot of new equipment over the last couple of years. It has allowed our maintenance department to cover more ground and have better equipment to work with, and our maintenance costs go down because now our maintenance is also being done in-house by our own staff. The Grove Street parking lot, we split with the Clark Center. They're willing to pay half of it. We're willing to pay the other half to get that parking lot paved. It is a joint agreement that we have with them, and we're looking for that. That is $21,750. The
Mr.
big one
Barbaro?
on this year, as everyone can imagine, is road paving.
Excuse me,
Yep,
Mr. Barbaro.
sure. Do you have any
Just to
questions?
clarify, the name on that is a little misleading. It says Grove Street, but it's actually the parking lot between the Clark Memorial and the dry cleaners and the bank,
That
for
little
for anyone to
square
get
section
it into perspective.
there.
Thank you.
Nope, thank you. Next up is road paving. What you've noticed in town is a lot of roads that need repairs. And so what we've come up with is a $1 million bond to be funded multiple ways. And I can go over that with you. The FY23 cannabis revenue for $250,000. Also, Maybarty, when they've been filling the old dump there that they have, It's $1 a ton, so now they've exceeded what they originally had, and there is enough amount of money of $300,000 to be taken out of that, which comes out of free cash, but it gets backfilled from them. And the 5-year borrowing note comes up to $450,000. $95,000 would be our yearly bill to pay that, and that would come out of cannabis revenue projecting forward. This means that no money will be coming from, additional money will be coming from the taxpayers. This will all be funded through the budget, and we'll be able to catch up on multiple roads. As you know, we've been base coating or putting another coat on top of the roads. It is allowing us a 10-year span on some of these roads to keep them maintained, and that way we are not having to mill and grind them. And you put on top of that the $452,000 that we get from the state. That gives us a good jump on the next year, knowing that as we are going out to bid for asphalt and a contractor, this will attract a bigger company to do the work for the town, which means we'll have a bigger company coming in, we get better pricing, and we'll be able to get the work done a lot faster.
The current balance for the cannabis revenue is $107,000, and you have it cannabis revenue for $250. So you're anticipating that it's going to.
That is what the town manager has projected. That's a conservative figure. He projects that to be higher, but we didn't want to overestimate. That's what we have coming through. You have the second cannabis store opening, and the revenues have not come in from them, but based on the Bud Barnes revenue, it's a safe bet that he's been very conservative with that number and feels that that's a number he can work with comfortably.
Okay. And then the 5-year borrowing, you have $450,000. Is that coming out of free cash?
That $450,000 is coming out of $95,000 projected per year from cannabis revenue.
So when I look at the projected, on the projection, you have, on number 5, you have the whole million coming out of FY24. So should that be projected out to the 5 years, from 24 to 28?
Well, it has to be borrowed up front. So basically, we are only borrowing $450,000 over a 5-year note. $250,000 is coming from cannabis, $300,000 is coming from the Maybardy dump. So that's cash in hand. That's actually the money from Maybardy is coming from free cash, but it's over a projection.
Okay. So
Okay?
it's going to be free
And then,
cash.
so the actual borrowing note for 5 years is only $450,000.
And that's the free cash. That's going to be free cash. And then,
No, the $450,000 will be a borrowing note, and $95,000, which will be the annual bill to pay that off, will be coming out of marijuana revenue.
If I could highlight up on the screen, it's called out fiscal 24 to fiscal 28 cannabis revenue in the breakdown.
I've got a similar question.
Sure.
On the Maybardy payments. I think the line item in the revenue report, there's several miscellaneous revenues. I think this is the one that was Maybardy because it was budgeted at $193,000. It's currently at $341,000, so it's up $148,000. Now, the thing I'm concerned about is that the 193 is calculated revenue to run this year's budget, correct?
No, so the Maybardy payment we've held separate. So in terms of projections, that's not something that's incorporated in the projection because it's a one-time revenue.
But it's included in our,
It's in the free cash number.
no, not free cash number. I'm talking about the revenue accounts, okay? Miscellaneous revenue, $193,000 was in the budget. So we're, as part of the local revenues, it included that 193. Now we're over that, so I'm assuming that this 300,000 is what you expect to be the total beyond the 193,000 that we built the budget on.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. So, and I think the important piece to drill down on here is that we're projecting out. So it is a carve-out from the figure that you're referencing. It is a separate amount of money that's gonna come in. The way that agreement was broken down is we basically got about $350,000 up front in a lump sum, and then everything that came in thereafter was $1 a ton up to another $350,000. So you're correct in that the original payment or payments that have come in were lumped in as just the undesignated miscellaneous revenue. But what we're recommending is moving forward, the ones that we have received pretty much, I'd say, to date in this fiscal year and moving forward, providing that we're on trend for our other revenues, which we are, rather than just letting them fall to free cash undesignated, we're trying to pretty much specifically designate them to road remediation, because that was the intent of the agreement.
So my only concern here is that in figuring next year's budget, that the $200,000 that was in this year's budget anticipated would still be in there to support the operation of the town. That you're really looking for $500,000 from Maybody. So you've got $300,000 for the roads.
Understood, and I think the important piece with that is that it was always intended as a non-reoccurring revenue. So, right, so that was a one-time revenue. So we'll be treating it as a one-time revenue. We'll keep that in mind on our total figures when we build the fiscal '24 budget.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the road plan? Okay, next up is a salt brine system. What that is a system that Brian has looked into and is looking to share with the town of Templeton and another town. What that allows us to do is to take the road salt, mix it in a machine, and turn it with water, turn it into a liquid, and then they will apply that down to the roads prior to the snowstorms coming, which will allow the roads to be treated much more exponentially and give us better coverage. It'll last longer on the roads, and by revenue sharing or municipal sharing with another community, brings that piece of equipment down to a reasonable cost for the community. And then, again, we'll have a tank on one of the dump trucks, and it'll go out prior to the storms and treat the roads, and it'll keep the ice and snow down off the main roads before a snowstorm comes, and allows our maintenance crews to get a jump on the storms before they come. So it's an added safety feature for the community moving forward. A generator house, he was able to secure a generator from another building, and that will be put in over at the DPW. So in the event that the power goes out, they can power up the DPW to keep that operation running when we do have ice storms, i.e. what just happened, throughout the community, and that will keep the DPW building heated and moving forward in the event that it's needed. And that's just to house the generator to keep it from getting exposed to the weather overall. Do I have that correct, Brian? Thank you. Any questions on that? Next up, we have a water service truck. Again, this would be funded through the Water Enterprise Fund for the amount of $98,884. As you know, the water department does a lot of things around town. They have equipment that they keep in that truck in the event of emergency. It is now time to rotate that truck up and move to a newer truck. That truck does get a lot of use, and unfortunately, since COVID hit and inflation, the price of the vehicles have gone up dramatically. Next up is a transfer station roll-off truck. That'll be funded through the enterprise.
Excuse me, Mr. Barber, you skipped line 15.
Oh, a leaf loader, sorry. A leaf loader is through the cemetery, where we have trees come down, you put the leaves in and it'll mulch them up, and that'll be paid through perpetual care for the amount of $12,250. Any questions on that? The next one up is a transfer station roll-off truck. What they're finding at the transfer station now is that trucking costs to remove materials up to where they, you know, the other stations where we get money for them, is costing the community a lot of money. And so what they've decided to do to save money is to buy a truck that can put the containers on it, the big 40-yard dumpsters, and take them up to, where are we dumping this stuff now? Fitchburg. And it'll substantially save that enterprise fund money moving forward, because we're paying someone else to do it. We're paying gas fees, we're paying, and this streamline it down, and then we can do it at our convenience rather than trying to have someone come in on a regular schedule. Next up is the
I'm sorry, Mr. Barbaro, and just before we move off that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that would be on a 10-year borrow,
10-year borrowing note, and then that would be
And the-
$24,000 per year,
which would come out of the transfer station
which
enterprise
would come out of
fund.
the enterprise fund from the transfer station,
Thank you.
which is, my understanding, without costing additional raise to the fees that are currently being charged. Next up is the SCBA replacement, Phase 1 through 6. It is the air units that the fire department uses. They're coming offline to they're at the end of their life expectancy, and we brought this up last year, but we were able to push it off. The amount of that is $26,000, and that will come out of free cash, and that is Phase 1 of a 6-year project to replace that total, fire department's total air packs. Questions on that? Next up is the police cruiser replacement. There are 2 cruisers that come up to $136,918, which comes out of the 911 grant that the police department uses for its regional response. Again, due to inflation and COVID, the price of vehicles have now jumped dramatically from what we used to pay. Next up is the Winchendon Community Park barn exterior. If you've been down to that park, we're spending a lot of money revamping that area. Obviously, we're going to have a beautiful amphitheater. That garage door there needs to be redone to keep limited access and to actually start working on that building. That's a 5-year borrowing note. To do that is $140,000. And that will cost the community $29,400 out of the operating budget. Any questions on that? Not seeing any. The high school parking lot. Up at the high school, we go up there for town meetings, you are well aware that that parking lot is over 30 years old. It is in need of some love. And that is going to be on the agenda to be paved over. It is a cost of $150,000, and it's a 5-year borrowing note, and the cost would be $31,500. The total fiscal year expenditures is $2,484,394, which it sounds like a lot of money up front, but when you spread it out equally, it doesn't cost the town that as much as you think, and it is within our capability to borrow and use free cash to fund all these. Again, I must tell you that this will not cost the Winchendon taxpayers any additional tax dollars to fund these programs this year.
Thank you, Mr. Barbaro. Question, Mr. Solzback, you probably know, what is our balance in free cash? Or Mr. Kane, you might know.
Somewhere around $1.8 million.
I was going to say 1.7 to 1.8.
1.7 approximately. Okay, thank you. We'll open up to questions from the board.
The,
Seeing and hearing none, Mr. Kane?
just the, I guess I got a question about the water service truck. Is that going to be use a 5-year borrowing with to buy the water service truck? I mean, I wouldn't think that the water department right now has $100,000 in reserves.
So We don't have it broken out on the sheet, but I think that's a valid point, so we'll break that out as a 5-year borrowing. But it is carved out separate just from the the water enterprise account, but it doesn't specifically call out how it will be broken out, so we'll add that to the sheet. Thank you.
Mrs. Anderson?
Madam Chair, could I ask, how old is the truck that they're using now? And how many miles does it have on it?
Mr. Croto, perhaps?
Current truck is a 2014 with over 100,000 on it.
But from what Mr. Barrow said earlier, we expect a 20-year lifespan out of it.
Not on that
Not
truck.
on no dump trucks.
That's a pickup. A pickup has a 10-year lifespan.
What kind of truck is it?
It's an F-350 service truck used, if he's on call 7 days a week. The truck goes to every water break, every service call. There's 2 of them, and they're both on the road every single day.
Anything further from the board? Mr. Kane, anything further from the Finance Committee? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Barbaro.
Thank you for your time.
Bill, let's wait and see what they can do and see.
All right. Anything further on capital improvement plan in general? No? Okay. Next up is 6.2, review of the special town meeting warrant.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair,
Yes,
is it an appropriate time for the Finance Committee to motion to adjourn?
yes.
Thank you.
Say the motion?
Second, yeah.
Second. All in favor? Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, did you all want to stick around for the update on number 5 and provide a recommendation on it based on improvements?
We'll update you after.
Thank you. You all
Yeah.
your people call my people?
We've, right, before we came down, we read through the revised language and voted to approve to recommend the Article 5.
So it's 6-0, conditional on the revised language being approved.
Thank you.
All right. Moving forward, so 6.2, review of special town meeting warrant. Mr. Saltzback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you've run through this before as a group, and a majority of it has stayed the same, but the areas that have changed significantly. So I'm going to walk you through them as a group, and we'll start right from the top. If any of you have questions, or anybody out in the abundant audience this evening has any questions, feel free to stop me, and we'll explain a little further. So this is for the special town meeting to be held on Monday, March 13th, 2023 at 7 o'clock p.m. at the Murdoch High School. Article 1 is a committee report, which typically the Finance Committee would provide a report. They have expressed that they will not be providing one for this, so it can be passed over. Article 2 is prior year bills, which I'll scroll down. We originally had a placeholder in there of about $25,000. We reduced it down.
25,000?
The placeholder was 25,000.
What's 1,000?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so I went big. But we have reduced it to $1,394.86. Those 2 items haven't changed. They're both from fiscal year '22. One is to each his own design, which is for flowers for Memorial Day, the wreaths specifically. And the second was a second sheet of a KP Law bill that was missed in processing. As always, for prior year bills, that requires a 9/10 vote. Moving on, Article 3, capital purchases. For this particular item, it's $40,000 for broadcasting equipment that we've discussed pretty extensively. It would allow for the live broadcasting online. Right now, it's only available on cable, with the problem being that a lot of people either don't have access to cable or they've since cut the cord. And so that will bring that back. It's also going to allow for remote participation, which is something that the board has been advocating for since I got to town, so we'll finally be able to follow through on that commitment. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay. Article 4, the general bylaw amendment. So nothing has changed on this since it was last discussed. It's combining the existing Winchton Community Park group with the Recreation Commission. It's also renaming it to the Parks and Recreation Commission to help provide some public input and guidance on just how we're retaining some of our park spaces existing and new ones coming up. It also rephrases some items where it called out specifically that they had to be Murdoch, Winchton school students, but there are students or citizens of student age that go to either school choice or the tech school or something in between, so it kind of took away that needless obstacle. And then one other item that had come up as well was, sorry, just scrolling down to the next page, talking about the establishment of reasonable fees, and that's something that's come up as a pretty big discussion, especially with the community park amphitheater opening, where they have been discussing how to keep people from walking in from the woods, and we have talked about wristbands a little bit, but it's something we're going to have to try to figure out as we go along a little bit. And then also, as always, that commission will submit their annual budget to my office for review as part of the larger budget discussion. Are there any questions on that piece? Okay. So the big one is Article 5, the Community Preservation Act. So we've done effectively a full rework of this. I spent some time over the weekend with legal counsel and again this morning trying to find something that works. I think part of the hang up here is that we're trying to make a lot of people happy at once, which is always the largest challenge in a democratic society. So we've gotten pretty close, and I'll read you all through it. So the biggest hang-up was that the language that we had it as by design was somewhat vague, not to be deceptive, but to provide, or with the intent to provide flexibility on town meeting floor if people wanted to make an adjustment. The feedback that we received from several committees and members of the public is they wanted it to be very to the point. And so as part of that, we incorporated, for example, that it would specifically be a 3% tax surcharge, that specifically there would be the 3 exemptions in place highlighted here. There was a question that came up in a recent meeting about the language regarding property owned and occupied as a domicile by a person who would qualify for low-income housing. So what that is basically referencing, it's an owner-occupied clause. You see it in assessing a lot. So basically, it wouldn't be for a renter who could apply on a property that someone else owns. You would have to actually own that property and reside in it. It can't just be like a rental income property. The second piece is exempting $100,000 of taxable value off residential real estate, and the third piece is the same, but for Class 3 commercial and Class 4 industrial. Does anybody have any questions on the mechanics of that? I know we've covered it a couple times, but if there's anybody new. Okay. The other component was, aside from that, is the future implementation of a bylaw. So if this passes the special town meeting and if it passes the ballot on May 1st, then it would have to go to annual town meeting for an article or a bylaw article actually establishing a community preservation commission in town. And the Community Preservation Act Exploratory Committee, as well as some members of this board and some members of the Finance Committee, had expressed a desire to formalize the intent of the town in some capacity as best they could, so that they weren't just effectively handed the keys to the car, that there were some very specific guidelines that had to be in place so that the voters of Winchton knew exactly what they were voting on and exactly how it would be implemented or how it's intended to be implemented in the future. And so this italicized portion, I'm going to zoom out a bit, you're kind of cutting it off, which you don't typically see built into the warrant article language. And so we're making an exception in this case because everybody was pretty vocal that they wanted to see something or something similar to this. So what this does is highlight the aspects that the Community Preservation Act Exploratory Committee had put forth in a letter to the Board of Selectmen asking for a letter of support, which is going to be reviewed later in the evening. But it's also going to be right there in black and white, right adjacent to the warrant article, so it's abundantly clear to everybody in the room what this is. But not only in the room in that moment, so that in future years when people go back, as we've seen on a host of issues in town, and people say, well, I remember it this way, someone else remembers it a different way, you can look and you'll see it, it's right here. There's really no debating it. So the pieces that they highlighted were that there'd always be a 5% annual reserve that wouldn't be touched and allowed to accrue, that there would be an allowance of 5%, which is through Mass General Law, for annual expenses in effect in an administrative sense, so like recording fees or like legal fees and things like that for recording deeds that are being preserved. That it highlights specifically 10% will be set aside every year, and this is statute, so 10% every year to one of the 4 purposes of the CPA. So what we've just discussed a lot: housing, historic preservation, preservation of open space, and recreation initiatives. That the committee itself would be made of 9, 5 of which would be the standing committee members that are statutorily required as representatives, and the other 4 would be elected members. And so all of those pieces are covered front to back in this document, along with all of the recommendations, which are slowly filling in. The Historic Commission was a 5-0 vote, Capital Planning Committee 5-0, Conservation Commission 4-0, and then, if I heard it correctly, the Finance Committee 6-0. So that's where we're at this point in time, and hopefully this is an agreeable middle ground for everybody. Like I said, it's hard to find the middle ground sometimes, but I think we got pretty close to it here. Any questions on that one? I've satisfied you. Okay, great. And then Article 6, the Whitney Pond Dam non-binding referendum. So the biggest takeaway for this is that we'll have a slide on town meeting floor, just highlighting the low-hanging fruit in terms of pro and con list. But we also want it to serve as an opportunity as kind of a community brainstorming session for people to come out and really give some thought to this. Just really quickly, it's a binary vote, A or B, that the town take a more cost-effective route, repairing the dam that we can do pretty close to immediately, that would keep the present water levels where they are now drawn down, or route that would take a little bit longer. It would be a little bit more expensive, but it would restore the water levels back to they originally were. And the other piece hanging out on this that we'll have in time for town meeting is what's actually the cost of those 2 scenarios, roughly. It's going to be pretty early in the cost estimation phase, but it'll be able to tell you if it's going to be like a $100,000 gap or a $5 million gap, and I think that will really kind of impact how people view that topic. Are there any questions on that? Okay, so that's all of them, front to back, 1 through 6, and it'll be coming up on Monday, March 13th.
Thank you. Any questions, comments in general on the warrant?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
So we already approved the warrant itself. Do we have to go back right now and approve Article 5 because it's been changed? We haven't voted on approving that article the way it reads now,
Correct.
before we do our votes on whether or not we recommend the articles. I think we need to correct that because this was changed from the original warrant.
Okay. Is that a motion, Mr. Ward?
I motion to accept Article 5 as printed this evening.
Amended.
Amended.
Okay, we have a motion to accept Article 5 as amended before us this evening. It's been seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. Yes, accept language. All Jumping back to the agenda, next up is our voting our recommendations on the special town meeting warrant articles. So I will start at the beginning, and I'll be looking for motions on the different articles. Article 1, the reports and committees.
They're not having any for you to vote. It's-
Okay. Article 2, the financial articles.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 2.
Second.
Thank you. Made and seconded to recommend Article 2. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Article 3, the capital purchase of the broadcasting equipment upgrade and staff support.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Lapointe.
make a motion to recommend Article 3.
Second.
Thank you. Made and seconded to recommend Article 3. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. Article 4, the general bylaw amendment. On Article 24, Parks and Recreation Commission.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward.
I move to recommend Article 4.
Second.
Thank you. Made and seconded to approve recommendation of Article 4. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. Article 5, the Community Preservation Act.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward.
even though I think it's probably a bad time, I look at the benefits of this act, this article, and I recommend Article 5.
Is that a motion?
Motion to recommend Article 5.
I'll second for discussion.
All right, it's made and seconded for discussion.
I have to agree, I like it in theory, but I think the timing is terrible. And I think people are being squeezed about as much as they can, especially hearing from the CAC this evening, and I just wouldn't feel right. And I think we have to really think about that before we give our recommendation.
Mr. Salzback, I think at one point during the discussions on this article, I mean, this is putting it in place. Any sense of a time frame as to when the monies would first start to be collected? Does the collection start immediately?
It would be effective for your July actual bill.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I
Mrs.
have to
Salter.
agree with Mrs. Anderson. I think it's not a good time to add on any type of surcharge. I also point out that, we're going to have a big debt exclusion coming up with the fire station. And when the town manager presented the 5-year projected budget for the town, we saw that it's a negative because we're paying out more than what we're bringing in. That's the same thing for individuals. Everything's going up in costs, and I know that this isn't very much, but we keep adding on, and so I'm voting against it and recommending we vote against it for that reason.
Thank you. I agree with what you're saying, but it just needs to be understood that this is not, as we sit here tonight, we are not voting to put this in place. What we are voting to do is to put this before the townspeople and to allow them to decide if they feel this is the right time. I may not feel it's the right time, but I don't feel it's my decision. So that is why I will vote to support it, to get this in front of the townspeople at town meeting and at the ballot.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I feel like we're already putting it, because it's on the warrant, we approved it for it to be on the warrant.
Correct.
So it's going to the townspeople. We're
Correct.
just saying whether we personally would recommend this or not.
Thank you for correcting my verbiage.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. Any further discussion?
I think it's important that the townspeople consider whether, I think it's their decision, like we've talked about, whether they pay this tax now and then reap the long-term benefits of having that money come down the pipeline. I think it would be errant of us to decide that for them today. Yes, things are very, very hard right now, but I see that as their decision and not ours.
But that's why they go to town meeting, and that's why they go vote at the ballot.
Yeah.
It will be their decision.
Anything further? All right. Motion was made to recommend. It was seconded. We have had our discussion. So the motion is to recommend Article 5. All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? None, so it does pass 3-2. And then Article 6, the non-binding referendum for Whitney Pond Dam.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
motion to recommend Article 6.
Madam Chair, I'll second that for discussion.
Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. Go ahead.
It makes me nervous. It makes me nervous that there's an article that says that we will seek grant money and other available funds. And exactly what does that mean to the taxpayer? And knowing that it's non-binding and that it's really based on, what's out there, I feel like there's this theory that maybe $1 million of town taxpayer money could go into that. And again, I feel like we're squeezing our residents out, and we've got to be so very careful. And it makes me very, very nervous.
Agreed, and I think that, as Justin indicated, there will be additional information available, the pros of leaving it at the level it is, the cons of, both sides.
Right.
Some rough figures. When this Justin first brought this to me, again, I don't think it's something I need to decide. We need to, that the people, get some input from the people. But I think we do need to have that information available, absolutely.
And it just makes me nervous.
Yeah. And perhaps, Mr. Solzback, go ahead.
Sure, so if this quells your concerns a little bit, this isn't authorizing us to spend any money. It's giving us direction. So once we, if people say, go the potentially more costly route, but we want to see that water level come up, it'll cover the stumps, it'll be better for recreation. When that time comes and we have that final figure, whatever it be, $1 million, $5 million, this doesn't authorize us to spend that money. We would still have to come back to a town meeting and give people an opportunity to vote on whether or not we're expending those funds.
Madam Chair, if I might,
Yes.
though, the problem with that, though, I guess where I get a little bit squirrely is, like with capital planning, when they, bring us your capital plan, and this is what we're recommending, and they've got a point system. Well, I really, you didn't walk me through that point system. And without being disrespectful to Mr. Barbaro, without saying this isn't costing the taxpayers anything. It is. That's taxpayer money. That's all taxpayer money. And this is how they're choosing to spend it. And we really don't have a whole lot of say in that because I don't know their point system. I don't know how they got there. We just have to take it on the committee's recommendation that is so. And should Whitney Pond fall into that category under, a new capital planning and whatnot? Does that make sense? That's where my nerves come in.
It does make sense, and I think you draw an important contrast between the 2 points in that, the capital plan. If you have something like a fire truck, well, then we have a fire chief to advocate for that. A school parking lot, well, then we have the schools to advocate for that. Town hall, I can advocate for that, but there isn't really any group, board, committee, or person in town that advocates for that dam and provides direction or data on it. And so I think that kind of makes it difficult for my team to make an informed decision, and that anything else we're putting on the capital plan, it's because we're getting feedback from boards or committees or the citizens or data. That one, the opportunity really just isn't there. And so this non-binding vote is providing that opportunity, I guess, if that makes sense. The other part is we've hit a crossroads on the engineering piece, and so we don't want to needlessly throw money away engineering something that people in town don't want. And this seems like a good opportunity for them to kind of tell us what it is they want.
And I think in the, whatever information you put together for town meeting, make that point, you know, that the engineering of this has reached the point where we need to know what direction we're going to go in order to continue work one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just arbitrarily, we're pulling it out of the air, oh, let's talk about this now.
Right.
We're at a point.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I have just
Yes,
one
Mrs.
question, Madam
Salter.
Chair. See, I'm confused because so the water was high, we made some changes, so now it's low, so now we're gonna change it so it goes high again. I guess if your presentation can explain that, I think it's very confusing.
Sure. So in the moment right now, it was at a higher level. Is my understanding that at some point there was a sheet of ice or something had crashed into the dam, creating some type of damage. And they had to disassemble it and kind of shore it up for now, which resulted in having to draw it down. So like when you're driving over Glen Allen Street and you see all those stumps to the right and a little bit to the left, like those traditionally were submerged. Or even if you're looking at the coastline, if you're down like on Pond Street or even at the Winchton Community Park now, like that shoreline used to be way higher up the hill. And since then, I mean, it's the other side of the argument is, well, it's kind of been this way for some time now, and the world is still turning. So you know, like how do you judge between those 2 points? Yeah, but we can highlight, give a little narrative about the history of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Anything further? We have a motion to recommend approval. It has been seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you very much, everyone. 7.3, vote regarding an act relative to cost of living adjustments for retirees. Mr. Solzback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So included in your packet, I gave you a brief rundown of this issue, but basically the Worcester Regional Retirement System had reached out to every municipality regarding an act relative to cost of living adjustments for retirees. It was a piece of legislation that Governor Baker had signed on his way out the door, basically allowing for an additional 2% cost of living increase adjustment for retirees stacked upon their typical 3%. I think, you know, given the way inflation has been, that's, I mean, barely a dent, I think, for the retirees. But we have had some folks in our community reach out specifically to make sure that we're giving attention to this issue. So one piece of the legislation is that it requires a 2/3 approval from the chief executive authorities that are part of the WRRS, and in this instance, it would be the Board of Selectmen. So included in your packet, you will also find the correspondence from the Worcester Regional Retirement System highlighting those points.
Do we know how many towns are involved? And it says, you know, should 34 of the towns approved. How many towns in total? Do you know?
That are in the Worcester
20, yeah.
Regional Retirement, I do not know,
Just curious,
unfortunately.
okay.
I can look that up for you.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
thank you. And mine is loading. Was there another document related to this?
Just what I provided up on the screen.
Okay. Okay. Questions, comments?
Is this budgeted for?
At this point, no, but the lower amount isn't budgeted for either. We're still kind of waiting to see what numbers we're going to get back from the state on the cherry sheet. So could we find the space for it? Yes, but there would need to be some type of vote from this board stating that it's a priority for you, and I would find the money for it.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing and hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to support the 2% cost of living increase as proposed by the Worcester Regional Retirement System as allowed by Chapter 269 of the Acts of 2022, an act relative to cost of living adjustment for retirees.
Second.
thank you. Made and seconded to approve the act. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Moving on, 8.1, under old business. This is the carryover from our 2/6 meeting regarding the request for a letter of support. Mrs. Selsback, could you just refresh on everybody's memory, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Community Preservation Act Exploratory Committee, as referenced going through Article 5, had put forth a letter requesting support from my office and from this board regarding a list of certain requests or guidelines that they had hoped to have formalized in advance of the town meeting vote. And so those items, while worked into the language, are also outlined here. As expressed in the previous meeting, I'm fine with signing on behalf of myself and my office, but I know the board had a couple concerns about it. So among them is that we amended the letter so that you're not all called out individually. That did come across inadvertently as a little hostile. It is typical when we ask for letters of support that typically the board would vote and that the chair would sign on if the board was agreeable in majority. And there was an amendment, and thank you to Vice Chair Ward for highlighting this. And Selectwoman Anderson had also raised a concern, just to follow up, about the process for voting if somebody resigned one of the elected seats. And I had called back to the school committee vote and how that all shook out. So the piece of Mass General Law that Vice Chair Ward brought forward did confirm that it would be a similar format, that it would be a combined vote of the two boards. So it would be the Board of Selectmen getting a vote on that in a joint meeting with the future proposed Community Preservation Commission. And so I updated that in Section 3.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the board. Questions, comments?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
First of all, I would like to thank the CP Preservation Act Committee for listening to what I had to say and incorporating some of that in there, particularly the voting. And I did get that from Selectman Anderson when she brought up about the school committee. We voted for a school committee member, so why aren't we doing this? Which forced me to look into and find the state law that, yes, we should be doing because it's state law. I also appreciate that this is being signed by the chair of the Board of Selectmen, because I don't think I should be signing to approve what is basically going to be a bylaw change at the town meeting coming up in May before the public hearing is done. So I thank them for that, and I can support this now.
Thank you. Anyone else from the board have questions or comments?
I just
Mrs.
want to,
Anderson?
I just want to clarify, all we're doing is showing our support for the exploratory committee to continue with this after if it gets approved at town meeting and at the ballot, correct?
That is correct. So there is a line in there that calls out specifically, and I'm glad that you're highlighting it, that this isn't as much of a vote of support, so we know where the board stands at this point. But it's saying that if it were to go through, are you in support of, at least these financial guidelines that they put forward?
Thank you.
Anything further?
I guess I have one comment.
Yes,
So
Mrs. Salter.
if we're going to you want to let the voters decide this, then why are you signing it now when we haven't had the town meeting and the voters haven't decided? It's kind of like, to me, putting the cart before the horse.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I may, I think my interpretation is that the exploratory committee is trying to make it very clear to the voters that the money that would come from this is out of our hands. We have no decision-making ability in where the funds are spent, and I think they're trying to make that clear to the voters to help with their decision. It might be a different outcome if we have control over the money that comes through this 3%, as opposed to them having control of where that money goes. I think this is trying to convey that these financial guidelines keep it very clearly out of our hands.
And if I may, I'll just reference, and actually I think it's up on the board, on the last paragraph, halfway through the second line. We understand that all members of the Board of Selectmen may not necessarily support the implementation of the CPA in Winchendon. And as such, we ask for an understanding that voting in support of these guidelines does not equal a vote in support of the CPA. They've outlined these guidelines as far as how the money would be handled, who would be on the
No,
committee and
I
such.
totally get that, but what I'm saying
Oh.
is, the voters haven't said that they want the CPA.
Correct, not yet.
So,
Okay.
I just think it's wrong.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
I just add that the voters will have basically, well, 2, maybe 3 times to vote for or against this. So in March, a month from today, I guess, just about today, they will vote on whether or not to go forward with this. If they vote at that town meeting no, this is dead. It doesn't get to the second level, it doesn't get to this level. If they pass it in March, then they have a ballot vote May 1st. If they support it, it's got 2 votes, two events. If they go against it, and they went against, voted for it at the town meeting and vote against it at the ballot, then it still loses its done. So there's a lot of checks and balances on this. I mean, this is requiring 2 votes from the public. So I would encourage people, I see this as a good thing financially, but if this is going to cause you any problems financially, and if you're struggling, you need to get out and vote against it, or if you really believe this is a good way to get money for future projects, you need to get out and vote. So March 13th is an important town meeting. Even though there are only 5 articles, you need to be there.
Thank you. Anything further? If there is none, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Lapointe?
I would make a motion to support this letter and financial guidelines as developed by the Exploratory Committee.
Is that sufficient? Or should I say something about authorize the chair to sign on behalf of the board? Yeah, it should say that.
Okay.
Would you be okay with that?
So amended.
So the motion is to authorize the chair of the board to
Sign it.
sign this letter on behalf of the board as the chair, as the letter is before us this evening.
Yes.
All right. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Just, could I ask a question before
Yes.
It will read Chair of the Board of Selectmen, because I do have a problem if it says on behalf of the board. It will say exactly as it's.
Oh, yes.
Okay, I'm fine, I'll second that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll read chair of the board. All right, motion's been made and seconded to authorize the chair to sign. Any further discussion? I almost hate to ask. No, I'll always ask. All in favor, say aye.
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 I'm
Chair-
a no.
Chair votes aye, and there's 1 no. All right. Thank you, everyone. All right, 8.2 is Zappa 5, host community, did I say it right?
Yes.
Izapa. Host community, this is for, this is the one on School Street up heading out of town?
Mm-hmm.
Route 12, okay. Mr. Schultzback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as a reminder, this came before the board in May of last year for 703 School Street. It's the property where Not Your Grandpa's Tobacco had an active host community agreement. And they had come back before the board at that time because I had concerns that if they were changing ownership, it didn't necessarily satisfy the public input component and that it's new ownership. And I feel like that kind of changes, the way people may look at that. The ownership team kind of matters in terms of the operations. So at that time, the board did vote in support of allowing my office or authorizing my office to sign into this host community agreement, but I had committed at that time to bringing it back to you upon its completion. So between then and now, they have had a change in their legal counsel. There's some significant back and forth, and we have finally reached agreement on this piece. So I just wanted to highlight a couple components that have changed that are a departure from what you saw in your typical host community agreements, just because I think at this point the community is a little bit more informed on some of the nitty-gritty of what we are or aren't allowed to do legally. So the first is the implementation of a sunset clause. So when I got to town, the HCA's had no sunset clause, meaning that if we signed into agreement with somebody, you would have to wait the full term of that agreement for it to expire. Not as much of a concern if it's a grow facility because it's an unlimited amount effectively, but when you're limited to 3 retail facilities, it is in the community's best interest to get it open as soon as possible so that tax revenue can flow. So I didn't want the town to get into a situation where we agreed and somebody sat on it for 3 years and didn't do anything until it expired. So this way, they have 18 months to demonstrate something. They have to come back before the board, so it gives you more control. And I think at that time, if they satisfy the board, then you can vote to extend the HCA. But if they have failed to make significant progress, it gives the board the opportunity to pull the host community agreement and put it back out to somebody else that might be interested. Are there any questions on that? Okay. The second piece is the community impact fee. So we've discussed this ad nauseum, but basically there's the 3% excise tax, which you still get, but the 3% community impact fee has effectively been struck down by the Cannabis Control Commission. You're allowed to charge it, but you have to go back and justify every dollar, which realistically it's not, the windfall that I think people thought it was going to be, and it puts the town in the potential position for a lawsuit down the road. So in response to what the Community Commission or Cannabis Control Commission put forward, this board actually voted to strike that piece from all future HCA's. So I've struck that from this. And then the last piece that I wanted to highlight was going through and I guess highlighting that when the group came forward previously, there were no concerns expressed at that time, but we did talk about some of the important pieces regarding build-out and permitting and making sure we're holding them accountable in terms of odor control and other types of components. And so that's something we'll be actively looking at moving forward. So if there are no concerns, there's no vote that's required at this time from the board. You did authorize back in May. But if there are concerns, please let me know and I can make an adjustment before signing on to this.
In the HCA itself, it still references the community impact fees,
Mm-hmm. Yep, sharp eye. So
multiple places.
yep, so we kept the language in, but reworded it if there's, something reasonable. So the concern that legal counsel brought forward was, well, yeah, we may not at this time be able to identify something, but what if something comes down the road? And so it is still legally allowable if there's something that significant occurs, there's a large legal expense that happens from their existence down there against the town in the future, in which case we would want to be able to recoup those funds. But it removed the automatic upfront compulsory 3%.
All right, that's what I thought as I was reading through it. And one other indicates that they want to do a growing facility and have, sorry, I just realized my mic was down, growing facility and a retail sales, recreational sales establishment. And if I'm missing it, oh, there we go, 2,000 square feet of retail space. Okay. So they're asking for cultivation establishment, product manufacturing establishment, existing license, transporter establishment, and/or wholesale delivery operator establishment for adult use marijuana and marijuana products with approximately 2,500 square feet of admin space, 2,000 square feet of retail space, 10,000 square feet of cultivation space, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So under the recitals, whereas the very first one,
Sorry, what number is it?
under the recitals, back towards the beginning of it. I gotta get back to it. Whereas the company plans to seek an adult user tier 1 cultivation license, product manufacturing license, existing licensed transporter, and wholesale delivery operator. It does not mention the retail. The recreational, the way I'm looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
So that would need to be referenced there, correct? Unless it's
Yeah,
someplace else.
I'll go back and double check it with legal counsel. It should be in there, but.
Okay.
So they highlighted at the top as part of the agreement, but maybe we can just amend the recitals to include it, because it does go into retail a couple different times.
Right. I'd just like to see it referenced in the recitals.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to work it right into the first?
That's my thought, because that's where it talks about the licenses that they will be planning to seek.
Okay.
So just, add the recreational retail license to that list. And that was all I had. Open up to the board. Questions, comments? No? Okay. Thank you for that, Justin.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and next, 8.3, again, when you're ready, review of ClearGov data and determination for future use. Mr. Salzback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is something I had touched on briefly a year ago and had committed to continuing to monitor. So ClearGov, for folks that aren't aware, is a program that we currently subscribe to that I guess the best way to describe it is it's a widget that's on the homepage of the Town of Winchendon website that allows residents or businesses or anybody really that's interested to kind of click through our budget in a more, I would say, efficient way. It's not necessarily more accessible, but in the sense that if we were to provide our budget in a spreadsheet form, it's not quite as digestible as what this program does. It kind of makes budgeting fun in some capacity, if such a thing exists. So my concern, though, is that oftentimes after the glow of this kind of wears off, people don't really use it anymore. It's a $5,000 expense annually, so when we're looking at it, staring down the barrel of a tight budget year, this is one when I see it come up when we go through this, it kind of sneaks through every year, and it's easy for this expense to sneak through annually. So what I wanted to do is take a look at the data, which I provided in your packet that highlights how many people actually use it, which ClearGov does keep, and it's a component that I appreciate, but you have to actually specifically go out of your way to request it. So ultimately, we saw 40 sessions since the start of this fiscal year, which honestly, a few of those are probably me going through looking at it. So of that, if you were to break it down, on average, it was less than 5 minutes of viewing per session, which the numbers comes out to about $125 per session for the less than 40 times this thing has been used. So my concern, obviously, is that anytime you try to get away from the subscription, they got you because it has the appearance of not being transparent. So I just want to reiterate, every single thing we do as an organization is an open book. By law, it is an open book. And anytime if anybody had a question about any aspect of our budget, we are more than happy to accommodate and let people take a look. The budget is publicly filed. It's available public data. And so I understand the concern over the potential optics, but I feel like we have an obligation to kind of stress that this is publicly available data. So it's $5,000 a year, like I mentioned. If this is something the board wants to keep, then that's fine. But I didn't want to just cancel the subscription without bringing it forward, once again, in an act of transparency to make the public aware that we're kind of taking a hard look at this. It happens annually. We have a lot of expenses. I mean, that you could pay this out year over year for 10 years, and all of a sudden $50,000 is gone. And what have you gotten for it as a community? That's kind of my thoughts. But from there, I will firmly push that ball into your court, and I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open up to the board.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Anderson.
I went on our website to take a look and see what I could see and browse around. It's not easy to get to this. But what I will tell you is I was mortified because as I clicked on things like government links, Congresswoman Nikki Songus, her link is up there.
Keith Hickey is still on there too, by the way.
Yeah,
I asked
his
them to amend it
contract
a
is
year
there,
ago.
look that up too.
Yeah.
When it says town manager contract, which is supposed to be public record, it's still Mr. Hickey's. We really gotta update. You know, if you get rid of this, then you have to put an effort into updating our website because Ann Goby's not our state senator, and Nikki Songus has been gone for a while. And, yeah,
Yeah. So if I can build on that.
yeah, go ahead.
There are several, what I would define as special projects that we've been looking to address. So if Linda Daigle's not here right now, but she's still floating around the building. And part of the reason for that is we're looking at different, projects and initiatives that just kind of get like pushed aside and overlooked in the day-to-day hustle and bustle. And one of those is updating our websites. I ran into, I think it was our assessor's website about 3 months ago. I was looking to pull something up, and you had texted me about it too, yeah. I mean, they were referencing things from, 2020, and I was like, oh, wow. But then I kept scrolling, and it had 2016. Some really old data in there. And so one of the things that I would like to have Mrs. Daigle do is sit down with a lot of our department heads. We've had some turnover. Some folks just don't know how to update their own department's website. Train them on how to do that, and then help us get updated data onto the website so it's actually useful to people that are looking for information, myself included. And so with that in mind, there's an expense that comes with that. And so what I'd like to do is put up on an upcoming selectman meeting just some type of plan highlighting what type of special projects we would like Mrs. Daigle to work on before she leaves. She also has a lot of institutional knowledge that's going to walk out the door with her. And so I want to try to take advantage of that in some capacity. But I do agree, Mrs. Anderson, that the website is lackluster.
It's old and it's outdated and it's shameful. How about that?
Hey, we finally got the .gov on our emails.
Yeah.
When does that contract with ClearGov, when do we pay that $5,000?
We pay it in July, so we
July.
can opt out at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. That would give us time to get our act together.
Mhm.
And while we're getting our act together, I'm pretty sure it's the zoning bylaws. If we can please change the image on the cover, because it references a certain solar business from a prior town manager.
Oh my God, are you kidding me?
No.
Wow,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Anything further on this issue? All right. Thank you, Justin. So perhaps between now and when we look to renew this, if you could just give us an update on how things are looking on our side, getting all that stuff updated, because I sent you information about the AgCom too, so. Thank you.
And I apologize, I was looking down, taking a note. Was the outcome or determination there that you all would like to move away from ClearGov, provided that we get the website up to snuff? Is that the intention?
I would assume we'd have to have our own stuff up to snuff
Okay.
and updated so that somebody could actually look it up for themselves.
I would say that it's a possibility that, yes, we would consider moving away from that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you. And when you catch your breath, we have the town manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we did make an effort to tag out once again on the agenda items in the town manager report, but we are going to try to drill down on that a little bit more for advance notice. So if I can just get it open real quick, I'll be quick but speak slowly. So there's a handful of items on here. Our fiscal 22 audit has officially been certified. Motor vehicle excise tax bills will be mailed out in the coming weeks, so keep an eye out for that. I know they're easy to miss sometimes. Abatement season is underway in the assessor's office, and if you have any questions about that, specifically your tax bill or your value.
Could I ask, that I do have a question, because when you go to the assessor's website, there's no phone number to call, and when you email them, they don't get back to you. I've had it done twice, because I do have questions about my assessment, and there's nobody, like, who do I reach out to?
Sure, so I will have a conversation with them about that, and I'll probably regret offering this, but if you or anyone else in the community are struggling to get in touch with the assessor's office, please call me directly. I will get you in touch with them, and I also have a little bit of a background in assessing too, so I might be able to answer some easy ones for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and I know there's a lot of people that had some sticker shock when they opened their tax bill this year. So really, please give us a call, hold us accountable. I think at minimum, we owe you an explanation of why it may look the way it is, but please do reach out. On the personnel side of things, our town accountant vacancy is no longer a vacancy, so that's good news. We're holding interviews this week for the vacant assistant treasurer position. The Robinson Broadhurst Foundation has funded our part-time recreation coordinator in a full-time role, and that's going to take effect April 1st.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Is this full-time role in perpetuity or
Right.
1 year?
For as long as they fund it. So the understanding is, at this point in time, is that is a grant-funded consultant, technically not a town employee. And so I don't want to say agreement, but understanding seems vague, but somewhere in between those 2 points is that that project was supposed to be self-sustaining, and it's our goal to make that project self-sustaining. We made that commitment. But the conversations I've had with the Robinson Broadhurst Foundation is, could you please give us some breathing room to let us get on our feet so that thing can fund itself? And so the understanding is that they would pick it up for the first 2 or 3 years, depending what the data looks like for revenue. And then once we can demonstrate where we're at, I would like to phase in taking that into our general operating budget, but not taking it all in one bite. So even if it's a matter of, us picking up a third of it, not next year, but the year after, and then maybe 2/3, and then picking up the whole thing, but allowing us to kind of ease into that. But I really want to see what we take in for revenue first before we pick up that expense. Thank you for asking the question.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
So Robinson Broadhurst is funding the salary for this. It's a grant position, so this position doesn't get health benefits or anything from the town.
So that's actually an interesting dynamic. So the individual that holds the position also held the part-time planning and development coordinator role, which was under 20 hours a week, and so it wouldn't have triggered the need for benefits. But it was legal counsel's determination that even though that was a grant-funded role, it still kind of tripped that more than 20-hour-a-week thing. So they do have access to benefits.
So
But-
in fact, it's not entirely grant-funded?
Well, I can't really talk too much more. It's clear who the individual is, and it wouldn't be fair for me to talk about whether or not they're taking health care or not.
Well, we're talking about the position, and it's not just healthcare.
Sure, so I guess if we're going to push it to the edge, to be simple, they're not taking benefits. So
Any benefits like retirement or anything, does that go into it?
so they are part of Worcester County. But
You're saying they're available?
yeah, they are. We're making them available because we're legally obligated to, but it's presently not an expense, I think is the cleanest way I can
I
express
think that's
that.
what I'm looking for. Is it
It is presently not an expense.
fully, because that's not honest if we're telling them that it's a
Yeah.
grant position and the town is in
Sure.
fact
So,
paying some money.
so we have a legal obligation to provide benefits, but they're presently not being utilized. Is that good?
I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
That's as far as you can go at this point.
They could be utilized next week, so I think that part of it is a moot point. They're
Yeah.
available.
Yeah.
So at any point in time, the budget would need to make those funds available.
Right.
But in that case, you would have to say that the town is in fact expending money.
Right. There's always a possibility that the town will have to expend money for this.
Right,
So the salary is grant funded.
correct,
Any other expenses that may be related to the position
are not.
are not?
Mhm.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, I have one,
Yes.
because we mentioned the 20 hours, it threw me into another question. So if Robinson Broadhurst is funding this full-time, and there's already 20 hours being filled with the town, so we're talking, is this a 40-hour position that Robinson Broadhurst is funding?
That is correct. So it would be a 40-hour position. So prior to April 1st, actually, in the coming weeks, we're going to be advertising that part-time role.
Okay.
And we'll have to fill that role.
Good.
You're really making me earn it tonight. Thank you.
Yep.
Additionally, the Winchton Police Department has started the early phases of their accreditation process. So this is something Chief Walsky highlighted that really got me kind of excited when we were going through the early phases of finalizing his contract. So it's a multi-year initiative, and it will result in the Winchton Police Department being a fully accredited police department, which as a community is something you should be really proud of. So you have to start somewhere, so that's where they're starting. For project updates, the .gov conversion for our town website and email is officially complete. Thank you to Don O'Neill for seeing that project through. They don't just hand out .gov website addresses, and so it's, it was a lot of work, so good work for him. We're in the process of pricing out the cost of moving the town hall server over to the old fire station area of town hall. So right now, it's up on the 4th floor at the other end, kind of I guess on the opposite wall of the 4th floor conference room. But we are running on emergency lights whenever there's power outages. And so we ran into it where our email kept going down a few weeks ago because the power was turning off and then turning on and then turning off and then turning on like every few minutes, and it was really laboring the server, which is an expensive piece of equipment. The old police department / fire department section has a full-time generator, so if that went out, our communications wouldn't go down. So we're just trying to see what that would realistically cost. I know that ARPA funds aren't an endless pool of money, but that seems like a pretty appropriate use of funds potentially, but I just want to see what it costs first. And then also, rounding off a busy week for Don O'Neill, I'm happy to announce that we've received grant funding for cybersecurity training at Town Hall, and we're just waiting for the final documents to come into that, but that was something that we've been committing to over the past several months, just trying to get some of that and have it funded by the state, so that was a success. And then it's worth highlighting that there has been a lot of activity around Whitney Pond Dam, including site visits for Summer Drive as well as the Beach Street property. And then lastly, our team has been actively working on several grant opportunities that I want to kind of float out there to put on your radar. One of them is Mass Trails at the Webster Street property, so thank you for Brian for putting that out. We've also been working or with an engineer to try to secure a MassWorks grant. It's a pretty significant infrastructure grant for public-private partnerships, about $2.5 million. So we're looking at some potential downtown applications or maybe some other areas of town. And then the upcoming year's CDBG grant round, we're thinking about taking a look at Pond Street in the coming years, just after Gabby's and the whole way down. So that's right at the edge of our downtown slum and blight district. So that's on our radar as well. Thank you.
Questions, comments on the town manager's report? I actually had a thought, and it's interesting that you mention the old fire station. Yesterday, I traveled to the southwest part of the state and watched the Murdoch Middle School cheerleaders compete, and they took first place in their division. Congratulations to them. My granddaughter is on the team. But in our windings back and forth through some of those smaller towns, we passed multiple museums, like firefighting museums or various things like that. So I wanted to just toss out there, with that old fire station, maybe perhaps looking to make that a fire police museum, or something along that line. It wouldn't be permanently occupied, it would be open. The location is right across from the Whitney House and such like that. And I know that there's a fair amount of memorabilia that they have there, and I'm sure there's more. So I just wanted to toss that thought out and see what sticks.
And that is part of the conversation is future use, which is, I think, a talk we're all gonna have soon. And so over the past 2 years, my approach to date has been just trying to preserve the building as best as we can, keep it dry.
Right.
We've done a good job of doing that, but at some point, we should make a determination. And I think in the capital plan, we do include exterior restoration, once again, for the same purpose, to seal the exterior envelope. And if there's, ever a need, whether it be next year or 20 years later, at least the building's in good shape and it's not, actively deteriorating and costing you more money to fix it down the road.
Right.
So that's our approach for now, but
Okay.
thanks.
Thank you for your report. This evening, we have no minutes. Agenda items, our next regular meeting is, someone help me out here?
27th.
The 27th of February, 2 weeks from tonight. We do have 2 executive sessions this evening. So I move that the board goes into executive session. First, under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Discussion on the town manager's FY24 contract. And then our second reason is to go to executive session pursuant to the provisions of General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. I do declare. Topic: federal multi-district litigation versus CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, Teva, and Allergan. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Mrs. Salter?
Aye.
Mr. Ward?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We are in executive session at 8:29. And we will come back to open session for the sole purpose of adjournment.